jokes don't fly over my own head. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a long overdue video to have Matchpoint Canada on the channel once again. I believe the last time we had both of you on was when we did Tennis Jeopardy during COVID, but now we're having you on to discuss Tennis Canada and Canadian tennis in all regards for the past 2023 season. So Ben, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, our pleasure.
Great to be back with you again. I can't believe it's been so long, actually, because
it's been too long.
And I apologize for the backdrop here. I forgot it was going to be video. I would have done my hair or something, but my kids are being put to bed right now, and it's a disaster upstairs. So I'm sequestered in the bunker here, and this is the best I can do for you. But I'll come up with some good stuff when you ask me questions.
Just like that hair joke, right?
That's the only one I got tonight.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I'll give you that.
It's a good one.
It was a very dad joke. It was
and
a
that's
very
where I'm
dad.
at, and that's where I'm at in life right now, boys.
I love it. And Canada has had a lot of good memories so far. We had the return of Milos. We've had amazing stuff at the Davis Cup going on. But one of the biggest interviews you had this past year was Milos Raonic. And for a guy that just came back onto tour and someone that was relatively missed as one of the nicest and genuine people on tour, Ben, I want to start with your thoughts too. How are we ranking Milos's return to professional tennis this year?
I think I mean I thought it was just very special to see him back in the sense that probably a year ago, 12, 14 months ago, there was a lot of doubt if we would ever see him play again. I think retirement was seriously a topic he was considering, whether he would ever have the opportunity to play professionally again, given the state of his injuries. And unfortunately, injuries have been such a part of his career and such a story that he's had to navigate through his entire career. So I think it was a wonderful sight to see not only him able to return, but the events that he was able to play, in particular Wimbledon, where of course he made his historic finals run, getting a win over Roger Federer, getting to the final there, getting the opportunity to play the US Open again. And I think most importantly, beyond those two slams, getting the chance to play in Toronto, National Bank Open, feeling that Canadian crowd and playing in an environment 10 minutes from where he grew up and where his parents would drive him around to all our OTA junior tournaments and where he grew and developed his game. And, one of the most meaningful things I think he said to us in that 30-minute conversation when we had him on our podcast was he was most excited that his parents could see him play live again because they hadn't seen him since 2019 Australia because of COVID issues, injury issues, and that long layoff. So just being able to play in front of them again was so meaningful for him.
That's very inspiring, especially coming from a guy that's made a Grand Slam final and has made, I believe, top 10 in the world, correct? And correct me if I'm wrong.
World number three.
See, there we go. So even Mike has to show us what 3 is. So thank you for that, Mike.
Hey, listen, people forget what Milos did for Canadian tennis. He was really the guy that put Canadian tennis in terms of singles play on the map. We didn't have anyone ever like him before. Clearly, the Grand Slam final, top 5 in the world, decent showings at other slams as well, consistency. Lethal serve, one of the best serves of all time. A guy that you never want to face when you see your name next to him in the draw. And that held true this summer, even with nearly a 2-year layoff, which is a phenomenal amount of time to miss and then be able to come back. And coming back on grass clearly was helpful for him. Of all the surfaces, best time for him to return. And still that serve was there. And that was one of the things he told me and Ben was, I think we asked him straight up, how hard was it to get that serve cranking again? And he said that was the easy part. The serve is always there. Like it's always ready to go. It was hard for him to warm it up and gradually get it back to, because he just wants to go out there and drop bombs. And when you're off that long, I would imagine you got to sort of take it easy and gradually, return to full power with that. But what we saw from him this summer was, glass half full, glass half empty, but winning some matches after that long layoff. The match against Tiafoe here in Toronto, which is one of the matches of the tournament, absolutely electric. The controversy at the end of that first set when Tiafoe hit the outside of the net, but it was in the doubles alley, so it was deemed to be okay. That was a confusing moment. Thank God Milos won the match. Otherwise, who knows how it would have gone down with the crowd, the polite Canadian crowd. But then he is still dealing with some injury issues, like the shoulder needed time to recuperate after Toronto, forcing him to miss Cincinnati, which is one of his planned stops. And now he's dealing with a little bit of a knee issue, which he's wondering if it's going to keep him off for the Asian swing, which he was hoping to do. So we'd love to see him continue, obviously, and I think he could still play a really big part on the ATP Tour. When healthy, I think he's still a top 20, 25 kind of guy with that serve. But will his body cooperate? We just don't know at this point, unfortunately.
Which is sad to say, because especially when you see him coming back and then injuries keep occurring after that too, after taking such a long hiatus, it's hard to see how he could progress and advance little by little when there's always 2 steps back to go 1 step forward, other than the other way around. And I'm going to turn to you, Mike, first. So how would you grade Milos's, if you were to grade his return this year, what would you give it?
You want like a letter grade? You want a percentage?
Yes.
How do they do it down there?
Aren't you a teacher? Shouldn't you know how to grade with letters?
But Canadian education system, American education system, I'm not saying we're better.
You do A, B, C, D, and F, right?
We do.
Thank you. Mike,
Ben,
how would you...
speaking here, Ben, the non-teacher, is going to take that one. Okay,
yes, because he answered it completely straightforward.
I'm just trying to be difficult. I've missed you, Phil. I'm just trying to get in my,
Thank you, Mike. Yeah. It's been a while.
We're going to give him a B+.
B+.
A B+, considering what he achieved in the short sample. I mean, what, 4 tournaments I think we're talking about? Winning around at Wimbledon, pushing Tommy Paul at Wimbledon. Toronto, if it weren't for Mackie McDonald playing so well, I think Milos would have gone even deeper there. But then also physically feeling those effects. So yeah, I think B+ is more than fair. And but just who knows what's going to come next. Like, I don't want to get too excited about it, because I don't know, is he going to be able to play in 2024 or not? Like, when we spoke to him, he was kind of beyond his initial, I'm going to play Wimbledon in my hometown Toronto tournament, but that could be it. And then he told us, no, I want to see this through a little bit further.
Okay.
And now you just wonder if that can happen. Now he's at Laver Cup as an alternate, but he said likely not to play. But I think nonetheless very encouraging in terms of when he was healthy, what we saw from him.
And so, Ben, what would you give? Would you agree with that grade, or would you change it?
Well, I'm glad I didn't have Mike as a teacher. He's a tough grader. I would go A-.
A-. Okay.
I would go A- for a couple of reasons.
Go for it.
Firstly,
softy.
Yeah, softy. Well, firstly, not only winning matches in his return, but quality of wins. The fact that, I mean, when he initially made that return on grass, Miomir Kekmanovic is a difficult opponent. It's not like he got to ease his way in against someone who is top 150 or something like that. He's already playing a quality top 50, top 40 guy, defeats Kekmanovic in his first tournament, winning a round at a Grand Slam, even if it is Wimbledon and his best surface, I think was such a positive. And then beating a top 10 player like Francis Tiafoe in 3 sets and getting to the 3rd round of the National Bank Open. I think that's just a great success, more than you could really ask for and expect. And then it's not an A, it's an A-, I think, for the simple fact of health and those concerns resurfacing, as Mike mentioned, like dealing with the knee issue, shoulder that was bugging him, and kind of slowed his progress even in the grass season, that he was kind of just holding it together in Wimbledon and missed one of his lead up tournaments there. We don't know if he's really going to play in the fall, even if he is at Laver Cup. So those are the concerns, is why it's not an A, but he proved to me when he is healthy and his body is cooperating, he can still beat a top 10 player.
So what would be, for both of you, what do you think would be the ideal ranking to see him get or achieve? Currently at the live rankings, he's 323, and that's barely playing. But what would be an ideal ranking or goal if you were his coach to come back on tour next year in 2024?
I don't think he's going to put a target for ranking, because I don't think he's got enough confidence in his body to be able to, put that out there and not disappoint himself and his team.
Okay.
I think an ideal situation would be able to return and play semi consistently. Like, is he ever going to be able to play week in and week out? Definitely
No.
not, right? With his knee, with his hip, with his foot, with his all of the above. But I think even a semi consistent schedule, being able to get through best of 5 matches at the Slam, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think that would be an ideal situation. And I think he could still get his ranking back into the top 50. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if he can play consistently enough or if he's going to be able to stay healthy enough to realistically get to where I said I see him being if he could be healthy. I don't know if that's attainable. Just like, Andy Murray, I don't know if we'll ever be able to see him get beyond, because in a best of 5 again, I don't know if that body and his age can.
Mm-hmm.
He's older than Milos, of course, but there's a lot of miles on the Raonic frame, unfortunately. So I don't want to put a target on ranking. I just want to see him healthy, and I want to see him when he does go out, be able to go out on his own terms, hopefully.
Okay, how about you,
Yeah.
Ben?
Yeah, I'd probably echo something similar. I think like feasibly, if he plays enough next year, sure, maybe he can break inside the top 100 or better. But I think if I'm Milos Raonic or part of his team and you're looking at a 2024 calendar, especially now, given what he's been through, all of the injuries, ability to have, a sustained season where you're not going to have setbacks, what you're probably looking for is, a good tournament lead up and then playing Australia,
Mm-hmm.
being able to get through Indian Wells in Miami. And then I think it's pretty safe to say we'll probably never see Milos Raonic on a clay court again. I mean, he was pretty clear with us that
Yeah.
clay seems to actually, not even just for lack of success, he says it gives his body the hardest time.
Yeah.
Which is, it doesn't seem that his lower body cooperates with moving on clay. So then you're thinking, okay, how can he sort of view this season, run a training block to be healthy and really peak for the grass where we know he can have the most success? And you think of, you can look at examples prior of guys like even when maybe Sam Querrey wasn't playing as much, he'd show
Mm-hmm.
up to Wimbledon and make a quarterfinal. Like, is that realistic? Is it something Raonic could do? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if he's healthy, if he's, serving absolute bombs and comfortable getting to net, the forehand's working.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's possible. We know he can beat top 10 players on a surface like that. And I think if he could hold it together through a grass court season, maybe he can play Canada and the US Open again. Those would be my sort of targets for him.
We want
Well,
the 1998 Goran Ivanisevic wild card
Yeah.
run to the Wimbledon finals.
okay.
I mean, that's what the Cinderella story, the fairy tale
Exactly.
ending.
Okay.
That was amazing. Yeah.
And if we look at some of the more regular players on tour this past year, if we look at I guess the top 2 Canadians right now in the rankings with Dennis and Felix, it was very lackluster this year. And it's hard to say that. And I would say be optimistic with it, but it just seemed like a down year for those guys.
It
And
was.
and for me, and who would rather talk about Dennis and who would rather talk about Felix?
We don't want to talk about either of them, actually, Phil, to be honest with you.
I'm happy to talk about Dennis. Actually,
Okay,
I can give a
go.
positive spin on Dennis.
All right, Ben, let's hear
You're
the
leaving
positive
me.
spin.
You're leaving me with the hardest one. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, I'm leaving
That's
you
why
with
he did that.
the grunt work.
That's
Exactly.
why he did it on purpose.
All right, peace. I'm out. See you guys.
Okay, bye, Ben.
I
All right.
mean, we've had this conversation with Denis Shapovalov, I think, for the past couple seasons now. Like, Felix is the bigger surprise. Dennis is still, right now he's still inside the top 30. He hasn't been healthy since Wimbledon, where he actually made the round of 16, and I thought that was a positive result because he even had a great opportunity to make the quarterfinals there. Then he gave him problems in a 4-set loss to Roman Safilin. But
Yeah,
I think a lot of Canadian tennis fans, they're going to find this difficult maybe to accept that Denis Shapovalov is probably always going to be this hot and cold, streaky type of player. This is
yeah,
his game style. You're going to have he's like a 3-point shooter in the NBA. When he's feeling it, feed him the ball, he's going to, get on a run. And when he's not, it's going to be ugly for a few weeks. And those have been the patterns for the past few seasons where he'll lose 8 of 9 matches. Then he'll make maybe a semi of a Masters 1000. He'll make the
yeah,
semis of Wimbledon like he did in 2021. He's not seemingly built for consistency. I think we know his talent and his pedigree and his ability, that you could still realistically see him again make a semis of a slam next year. It wouldn't shock me. Play great in Australia. Who knows? I mean, he played really well in Australia in 2022. He had Rafael Nadal in a fifth set there. A great opportunity to win that match. In fact, I think against, top opponents, he can hang with the best of them. It's consistency over time at different tournaments. He's never really put together. I think we have to just accept the reality that this is the guy he's going to be, a flashy shot maker who can get hot for a week or two at certain times and probably be around the top 20, top 30. That's how I feel, at least right now.
And
but
for
the thing
him,
is, Ben, sorry, Phil, he seems to me to be getting streakier and streakier, less consistent the last 2 years, actually. And since that good run in Australia, Ben, that you mentioned in 2022 at the start of the year, what has he done since then to get us excited? I mean,
he made a final in the fall.
Team competition's good, right? Always plays well for Canada.
Are we talking about 2022 where he lost to Daniil in Vienna for 2022?
Yeah, so I was talking about making a couple. He lost.
Okay,
he got to the finals of it,
and right? I mean, that's too.
Yeah, so he made a couple. Again, those aren't incredible runs. You're talking about an ATP 500. Okay, he made a final.
Made the quarters in Rome too last year, where he beat Rafa.
Yeah,
and beat Sonego.
Then he went on that slide right after beating Rafa. Wasn't it after that he went on a terrible stretch?
The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight losses before Wimbledon. At Wimbledon, he won a 5-setter, and this is 2022 for those of you that are listening and watching. He lost the opener to de Minaur in Canada, and then he went to the round of 16 for Cincinnati, and then went to the round of 32 for the U.S. Open, and then he went to the finals of Seoul, and then semifinals of Tokyo. He had a good. That's 5 straight. Then, okay, sure.
Here's the thing. I mean, I'm glad actually just you mentioned the name Alex de Minaur, because that to me is such an interesting contrast, and I think you probably would watch those two players on the TV screen and think, wow, Shapovalov should be killing this guy. He's more talented. He's more flashy. He's a better shot maker. I think we have to accept Alex de Minaur is a better player. He's won multiple ATP titles. He's been very consistently in the top 20. In fact, he's up to number 12 in the world. We saw him really peak actually in Canada this year in Toronto, making the final. Here's a guy who's we're seeing kind of steady incremental improvements over time and getting a little bit better season by season. Dennis has not really done that at all.
And steadier emotionally too, right? Steadier emotionally, steadier in terms of his composure on court, whereas Dennis still has the tendency to fly off the handle, to let distractions get the better of him, and to act in ways that really, not very becoming of a Canadian sometimes on the court with the amount of complaining that he does. I wish he could just cut that out and move past that. And hey, he's getting married at some point soon, so maybe that will have that positive influence on him and calm him down and help him with that maturing process. He's only 24 years old still, but
that's shocking to me too.
That he's already 24 or that he's just 24?
Both. I don't know that it's hard to say that though, but if you really think about it in terms of age when it comes to tennis, the fact that he is 24 and he's not hitting that mark and he's 24, that's still young as an athlete. If it's 26 and above, you're past your prime. At least in tennis wise, at least for me, you can consider that. I mean,
so we're all past our prime is what you're saying here.
Yes, Mike. Yes, we all can't survive anymore. A 2-set match will floor us for a week. Thank you.
I was sore after my doubles match last night. That was concerning.
That's even worse.
I know.
But Ben, the consistency kind of going along those lines with de Minaur as well, with the maturity. If you just look at the stats alone and you saw it in 2022, he went 47-25, and then this year he went 39-20. That's an unreal stat. And the fact that I'm looking at his last couple of results: U.S. Open round of 16, Cincinnati Masters round of 32, Canada finals, Los Cabos finals. He went back-to-back finals at a good level, and he's not even having knock on wood, injuries for a guy
Well,
that slides and runs.
and this is, I mean, this is sometimes the difference between certain players too. And I think as well, Denis Shapovalov has an incredibly high ceiling. Someone like a Dimenauer has a very strong floor. And I think this is the problem with Denis Shapovalov, right? The ceiling, the peak of his play is, wow, he's just running through the draw. And now he's playing Novak Djokovic in the semifinals of Wimbledon. And then the floor is, losing to, gosh, whoever, Vic Capriva a couple of years ago at some like ATP 250.
What a name, by the way.
Yeah,
How did that
yeah,
That's the first name that came to your mind?
Well, I was trying to find like someone who is one of his worst losses over the past couple of years. So
could be Mike. You never know.
Yeah, so I think that is sort of the issue with him, and that can be a thing with certain kind of aggressive game style type players honing in on consistency, but it's just the conversation around that has existed for a couple of years. It hasn't changed. He brought in Jamie Delgado, former coach of Andy Murray, to instill discipline.
That didn't last long.
No,
what,
it did
3
not.
months?
Not even, I don't think. Yeah.
Right. And nothing changed. So yeah, at this point, how many seasons has he played on tour where I've come to the realization that this is who Denis is, and we're gonna have some great moments, and you're just gonna have to, tough out the struggles because they're always gonna be there.
I like that ceiling floor analogy.
I did too.
You should use that on Matchpoint Canada this weekend when we record.
Oh, okay. I'll consider that one.
He probably learned that from one of the 1,000 books that he reads that's behind him.
As I explained before we started recording, I've read like 2% of what's behind me. But anyway.
See, I told you.
But that's okay. He seems smart. So
thank you.
You're welcome. And so, Mike, we're going to pass the mic over to you. I did not intend that pun, but here we are. But for you with Felix, and I will say this before you start with Felix, both Denis and Felix did not win more than 15 matches on tour this year.
Combined?
No.
Because I believe that. Because I would believe that almost.
It seems like that? Okay.
And listen, it sounds like I'm being hard on our Canadians here, okay? And generally, I'm always upbeat. I think Ben would vouch for this. I try and look at the positive, the silver lining. It's wearing me down this year. I got to be honest with you. It's really wearing me down. I mean, when one of the best Canadian stories is a guy who hasn't played in 2 years coming back and getting a couple of wins, I mean, you're in trouble. No disrespect to Milos, but for Felix, I mean, we talked to him here in Toronto back in the summertime. We were in all of his press conferences, and he really seemed fragile,
Okay.
He seemed a bit like a wounded animal. He seemed like, man, you just wanted someone to come up to the podium and give him a friggin' hug the way he was appearing. You could tell that his confidence was worn down. And he had been dealing with some knee issues as well, going back to the clay court season. Now, unlike Denis, who took the summer off basically after Wimbledon to recuperate, Felix didn't do that. He kind of tried to play through it, and I don't think that helped. He was also dealing with like a recurring kind of lingering illness that was making him feel really sick to his stomach as well. And that, he just wasn't at his best physically, and mentally he isn't either. So you got to have one of those two columns clicking. If they're both not firing, then you're in serious trouble. And that's what we've seen with him, as he's lost now, like 8 of his last 10 matches or something to that effect. And he came into Toronto and he was saying all the right things, but I don't think any of us believed him, like the confidence behind what he was saying wasn't there. He said he hoped Toronto would be a turning point in his season. Well, clearly it wasn't. Neither was the US Open. Now he's going to have some major, major points to defend this fall. Talk about pressure on him, as he won 3 consecutive tournaments last year, which vaulted him into the top 10 for the first time. Ben, how far could he slide if he goes out early in all 3 of those tournaments? Like, could he be like what, into the 40s, into the 50s? I don't even know, but it's
I think he won a 500 and 2 250s. So I mean, that's 1,000 points to defend. I think it would definitely, if he's not sharp and can't defend any, he could risk definitely dropping out of the top 25. I think he would still be inside the top 30, just looking at live rankings now.
And so it's the confidence is taking a big hit. He's losing to players, well outside the top 50. And yet And we had Mike Cation on the show 2 weeks ago from US Open Radio. Boy, Mike's fantastic, and that guy works so hard, and he knows what he's talking about. And he said that if he was to, buy stock in a player right now for 2024, he would buy all the Felix Auger-Aliassime stock that he could,
Okay.
and that he sees him getting back to the top 10, and that with his talent and his work ethic and practice, plus he's just such a nice guy, that he could not imagine him not returning to that level of tennis again. And gosh, I hope he's right. I'm not quite as optimistic, although I do agree that he works his tail off, and he's got a ton of talent. But I wonder if a coaching change perhaps is something that he should examine. I mean, Uncle Tony, I don't know how much that's really been helping, and I don't even know how often they're kind of touching base with each other. But his main coach,
it's still together. Are they
I
still?
haven't heard
Yeah.
otherwise. But he's not traveling with him week in, week out. But I think he needs a new voice, and Felix strikes me as someone who's incredibly loyal, and that's a good thing for sure in some ways. But at some point, professionally, something's got to give here. And in all of professional sports, who usually gets the axe? In team sports, anyways, it's the coach. And I think for Felix, that might be something that needs to happen in order for him to get beyond where he's at right now.
Well, for him too, I like how you put it as kind of he's loyal. It goes into that category of loyal to a fault. And for someone that he's worked with, I believe, his second stint with his current coach, correct?
With Fontang, yeah, I think so.
It's his second round going with him, and now the stock is plummeting after going back with him, and now and I feel like it's always been a common, at least on my end, a common idea that Felix has never had that mental game to support his physical game, which ultimately affects his physical game. But then he goes on a run after the US Open where he's beating players he should have been beating earlier in the season. So I don't know what needs to change, but something has to. And when Mike Cation came onto your podcast, Mike, do you agree with buying stock for 2024, or what do you have to see that improvement?
Well, I do, absolutely. And I'm not saying, I think Mike even went so far as to say he sees him. Did he say top 5, Ben?
He said top 5. Yeah, he did.
I think maybe he was being nice because it was his second time on Matchpoint Canada. Maybe he was just guaranteeing him a third visit on our podcast by saying that to our Canadian listeners.
Maybe.
I'm not sure, but
probably
I don't see it that positively. But I do agree with buying that stock because, look, he's going to have next to no points to defend in 2024 the way things are going. So,
yeah.
He's too good not to, and he's young too. He just turned 23 in August. Feels like he's been around forever, but he's still so young. So, I wonder sometimes if being so nice is almost to his detriment. That you need to be a bit of a jerk in some ways, almost have a little bit of an edge, and do no disrespect. There's just no edge to Felix in terms of he's just what you see is genuine. He's genuinely one of the nicest guys we've ever interviewed or talked to. And I wonder if that's almost to a fault.
And
yeah.
Go ahead, Ben.
No, I was going to say it's an interesting point. I mean, it made me think of Juan Martín del Potro, who in some senses was like the gentle giant, nicest guy in the world, but obviously a killer on the court, and he proved himself winning a slam, beating Roger Federer in a US Open final, proving he could beat the big three, big performances at the Olympics, getting a Masters 1000. You mentioned an earlier point, Philip, where you didn't see like mental toughness in Felix in key situations. And that has definitely been the theme, I think, in matches all this season. If I just reference losing at the US Open to Mackenzie McDonald, he was 1 of 13 in breakpoint opportunities that match. Yeah. Even when Mackey was serving it out in the 4th set, Mackey had love 40. Felix had a love 40 opportunity to get the match even, I think, at 5-all and get right back into it. Yeah. And I think he shanked a forehand. He missed a routine return long, just like little details. But in 2022, when things were really working for him, he actually graded, I remember in the ATP stats, he graded as one of the more clutch players on the tour in terms of saving breakpoint chances. He was an elite server in 2022. I think he was top 5 in serving efficiency. He was one of the ace leaders, like top 5 as well. So these sort of key statistics, and sometimes we don't always talk about the stats in this sport, but they were very much in favor of him last season, and it feels like everything has sort of gone sideways. And for me, it's as you both of course kind of alluded to, more mental than physical. I mean, athletically, I think he's one of the best athletes on the tour.
Super
The way
fit
he
too. That guy,
moves,
he's ripped,
Yeah,
right? Like that guy is so
incredibly
physically
fit.
fit.
Yep.
probably
Yep.
besides Francis, it seems like he has he's one of the most in shape athletes on tour. Not just tennis players,
Undoubtedly.
athletes.
Yep.
And
Yeah. And
go
like,
ahead.
I was going to say, and just, work ethic wise, you only hear the very best in things. And Mike Cation has a great perspective on that from working tournaments, and he'll see him go out. There's not that many players who go out after a match and work on their serve. This is something Felix did after he lost a semifinal to John Isner in Miami, and his serve let him down. He went out to the practice court in the evening, worked on his serve for over an hour. So he's so committed. But yeah, it raises questions. Does something have to change within his coaching team? Does he need a new voice? Sometimes I mean, confidence is wavering in this sport, and self-belief is kind of everything. That, we could see a switch get flipped in the fall. You never know. It could just take a couple of wins to build everything back up, and he could be right back on the right path for 2024.
100%. And kind of switching that over to the women's side as well, with singles at least. Mike, what's one word that you would describe Canadian women's tennis in 2023?
Inconsistent.
Ben, to you.
Puzzling.
Mike, go first. Why is inconsistent is, I think, a great word for it. But please explain.
Inconsistent and unfortunate, because I think the talent is there. Leilani Fernandez ranked outside the top 70 right now. Bianca Andreescu outside the top 60. I don't think it's my Canadian glasses on right now when I say I see both of them as being far above that in terms of their talent and ability. And again, if players see those names next to them in the draw, they're not going to be happy about an early round match against either of those two players. But
Right.
Inconsistent, Bianca Andreescu's physically been inconsistent with the injuries. What is it now? It's the small fracture in her back. Sounds awful. Kept her out of the U.S. Open. Leilani Fernandez seems to be getting things back on track right now as we speak, as we record this in Guadalajara. So that's fantastic, as she's into the quarters there at current time. So that's great to see.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I feel like if every tournament Leilani Fernandez played was in Mexico, she'd be a top 5 player, because she can do no wrong when she plays there. And my goodness, do they ever adore her. So I think that's part of it too. That crowd gets behind her every event she plays in Mexico. Isn't that where the tour finals are this year?
That's Cancun.
Yeah. Not obviously not that she's going to be there, but anyways, just where
Ambitious.
my mind went. But inconsistent. And Bianca's record is like, I think 500 level tennis this year. Leilani's a little bit better. Leilani Fernandez getting some good doubles results, so that's nice to see. For her. But she wants that singles ranking higher. I mean, she's told Ben and I as much that she gets pissed when she sees her singles ranking down where it is right now. So the motivation is there for both of them. The talent level is there for both of them. It's just super hard when you're in draws and you're not seeded, and you're going to get, the players that they've had to face this year early on in tournaments. They need to get their ranking up so they can have a few rounds that they can kind of blitz through and get their confidence going and their mojo going before they face those tough players. And it's happening way too soon in these draws. And, that's up to them to fix.
Mm-hmm.
On to Ben for puzzling.
Yeah, but puzzling, I mean, that's, I think, mostly to highlight Bianca Andreescu in her season, especially because we've seen these glimpses and these moments where I watch her play and I'm thinking she's back. Like this
Yeah.
is the 2019 Bianca we saw. I mean, particularly I think in Miami earlier this year. Now that's
Yep.
where she did suffer the brutal injury when she went down on the ankle.
Yep.
But her wins there, she actually played a great match with Raducanu, who Emma actually played a very good match there as well. 3-setter gets her going. She beats Zachary. Those two always have terrific matches. Beats Kenin in straight sets and is into the round of 16. And everybody felt, I think, with Canadian tennis during that week, like this is the Bianca we remember from 4 years ago. She's all over the court. She's dictating play with her forehand. She's serving well. That felt like the Bianca of old who won the US Open. And when you watch that quality of tennis, you really feel like you're watching a top 10 player or one of the great talents of the sport. And now, obviously, the injury was a huge setback. But again, we've seen glimpses where I thought she was putting it together, later in this season. At the French Open, I thought she had an amazing 3-set win over Azarenka there.
Yeah.
And you see that performance and you think, okay, she's going to build some momentum and really get going. At Wimbledon, she struggled through a couple very topsy-turvy matches and then is playing Ons Jabeur on center court. And it's this high octane thrilling match. It feels like a semifinal, really.
Yeah.
And if
3 sets?
if not for 3 sets, if not for,
always
an
3 sets
untimely,
with Bianca.
that's another thing we got to talk about maybe. But yeah, but look, if it weren't for a rain delay there, maybe she actually defeats Jabeur, and we're talking about a different tournament. And then since then, I mean, she sort of hit a wall, and then she has the back injury, and it feels like, as you said earlier, maybe 1 step forward, 2 steps back. She hasn't been able to build this momentum consistently through her season, and win-loss record being 15 and 16 is just so baffling to me when she has some of the quality wins that she does over, say, a Zachary or an Azarenka, that we know the talent and the skill set is there, that this should be coming together. I hope sooner rather than later.
What happened? How would you describe her loss to Serenko?
Oh, that was you know what, that week, I think, was that in Thailand? Yeah.
No, that was
she also lost to her in Thailand. Yeah. So Serenko's gotten her twice this year, actually. French Open and Thailand. I don't know if that's a bad matchup.
French Open, it's just like all the momentum was there. When she beat Navarro's actually proving herself. She just beat Madison Keys this past week, and Madison Keys made it to the semifinals of the US Open.
Yep.
I believe. But beats her 1-4, and then somehow out of the blue, it's 1-1.
Well, yeah, what happened?
She admitted she didn't have it that day, right? I think afterwards, like, she just said she woke up and she wasn't feeling it that day, is what I recall after that one.
And that's just so strange, because if you'd watched her second round match, and I remember watching it, like, she hit Navarro off the court. And it looked like a clinical performance and one of those types of matches of like, wow, Bianca can really go on a run. I'm not saying like, oh, she's ready to win the French Open, but seeing her level in the second round and even the way she played in the third set against Azarenka, again, it looked like a top 10 player. It looked like someone who can definitely be in the second week of the tournament pushing for quarters, semis, and hits a wall. And some of these inexplicable losses, Serenko 1-1, as you said, even coming out of Wimbledon, she had a bunch of bad losses. I know she lost to Georgie pretty poorly in Montreal. Now, maybe health-wise she wasn't there, but yeah, there's just been, that's why I use the word puzzling. There's just been a lot of head-scratching losses to her season. And maybe we need to give her more time, because she does have a new coach and they've been working together through this season. But I know Christophe Lambert and she have said 2024 is going to be the year where she maybe kind of breaks out.
Okay. I like that.
What's puzzling to me is that all 4 of our young Canadian singles players are all struggling at like the same time.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's intertwined, that they're connected at all. It's unfortunate. But it is, you'd think at least one of them, and we've sort of seen that over the past few years, that one of them's given us something to get excited about. And this year, not so much in singles. I mean, we've had some doubles results, we've had some team competition results to get excited about, and that's good at least, for a
Yeah.
country like Canada who has taken ourselves to become a tennis nation, but we're still a smaller tennis nation. We don't have the numbers of the US obviously to draw upon. So there is some positive stuff to get our tennis community excited about as the season starts getting closer to the finish line.
Yeah.
But singles wise, yeah, for all of them at this point, they got to hope that 2024 is a full reset. And I can't see all four of them. If we touch base, let's do this again next year, Phil. I can't see us
Thanks.
saying next year at this time that all four of them have struggled through another season. That would really shock me, to be honest.
Especially, I like how you pointed out that it's all four. It's not one is above the rest. At least on the single side, there's not one above the rest.
Even though their rankings, right? Even though there's quite a bit between their rankings, and Dennis and Felix's rankings are quite a bit higher, I don't really feel that right now.
I feel like they shouldn't
of,
be that high. It should, everyone's kind of around that 50 to 60 level ranking where Layla and Bianca are currently, even though it seems like Felix and Dennis are higher, but it doesn't connect the ranking and the way they're playing, at least in my mind.
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic with Layla. I think things are starting to come together. I really like the way she played in Montreal. She had a really good win over Haddad Maya. I thought that was probably the best match she had played this season. I think playing the doubles, mostly every week with Taylor Townsend has helped elements of her game, and she's not afraid to come forward and play at net. And I think she's started to play a bit more aggressively, which is helping her. And even as we speak now, just playing well in Guadalajara, I think it's starting to come together for her. And, she's had a lot of losses this season where she's lost very close matches, even at the US Open, I think against Alexandrova, like 6-4 in the third, couple battles with Caroline Garcia, who she seems to always run into in an early round match, losing a tight one, wherein Garcia's just sort of had her number. She's been very close a lot of times. And it's just, getting over that hump. I think Layla is very much turning a corner.
She's there.
She needs to play end of season Garcia, not early season Garcia. Because I think right now that would be. I think anyone could beat Garcia the way she's been playing right now. Almost, it seems.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I guess the word I'm going to use is frustrating, because it's there, but it's not. The click hasn't happened, because she beats players that are similar to her in that age gap, but it's not there where she can then progress onto that next level, because there's that pinnacle that she reached, and kind of the same with Raducanu, is that US Open final, that way of playing. We know she can get there, but it's not the same.
Yeah, and that US Open final as well. I mean, she had to come through matches with incredibly tight margins.
Yeah.
And it can't always work that way. She beat Kerber in this 3-set thriller. She remarkably survived Sabalenka in the semifinal. Arena must have been a heavy favorite for that match. And I remember Sabalenka, came out in that match guns blazing, was up 4-1 in like 10 minutes. And everybody thought, wow, this is going to be, this is going to be a beatdown. And she was able to redirect, handle her pace, make adjustments, and win another thrilling 3-setter. She fought past Naomi Osaka earlier in that tournament. So there were a lot of
players.
things.
What a group of players that she beat.
Right. Yeah, it was incredible, that run. The quality of players that she fought through. But
did she
the margin.
Beat Svitolina? Did she beat Svitolina there also? Or am I dreaming?
I think so.
It was quite, right? I mean, her path and Raducanu's path were quite different to that final. That's for sure.
That's true. That's true.
100%.
Yeah. But I don't think Layla, her game style, and she's a smaller player, but she does still pack a punch. She's not going to ever overwhelm and hit other players necessarily off the court. So she has to be creative. She has to be creative about it and find different ways to win. So her margin is always going to be a bit smaller for me compared to when Bianca is really on her game. And we actually do see Bianca hit players off the court. So they're completely different players in terms of the way. exactly style, the way they compete, the way they have to win. Layla, the lefty, who has to definitely use her variety and skill set in that manner. But when I watched Layla playing her best, for me, she is like a top 15, top 20 kind of player.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And on the positive side, now we're going to get to the positive side of this video. We're going to start with Gabby Dabrowski, who is a U.S. Open champion with fellow Canadian, but representing New Zealand, Erin. I'm not even going to try to pronounce her name because I still have yet to figure that out. Can Mike?
It's not a tough one.
Say it.
Tough one. Erin Routliffe.
Routliffe. Okay. Well, I don't know. Maybe you guys say it differently with your accent. I think I've heard Ben say out more than 4 times
about,
that. No, both of you. But Gabby, was that her first pure women's doubles Grand Slam title? She's won mixed.
I can't believe it, actually. I cannot believe it because I had just kind of assumed that she had at least a couple of them in the bag already.
Mm-hmm.
And she's been our most consistent player at the slams for years, singles, doubles combined. You can always kind of count on Gabby to go relatively deep, quarterfinals. She's got a bunch of women's doubles quarterfinals results. She did make the finals years ago at Wimbledon. Yeah, Wimbledon. But it's true. It was kind of surprising. Like Erin Routliffe getting her first Grand Slam doubles win. I mean, we knew that was her first. Well, what a rise for her. What an incredible progression over the past few years. It's been fantastic to watch. She's so nice, so kind. Gabby, you would almost thought that she'd done it before. And I'm not saying the mixed ones don't count, but I put a little more stock in the women's doubles results. The players do as well. So great to see them do it together. It felt like an all-Canadian win given Erin's background, which although she was born in New Zealand, she grew up and still resides in Canada. And it couldn't happen to two nicer people, and two people who, by their own admission, we had Erin on the podcast last week, two people who had been struggling this season and had decided both to seek new partnerships, texted each other, hey, do you want to try this? What do you think? Didn't click right off the bat, but some progress being made through their first 3 events. And then everything just fell together in New York so perfectly. And, happy for both of them. And it's incredible. They've only played the 4 events together, but they could qualify for the year-end WTA finals.
They're
depending on how things go in October.
She's currently 11. Gabby's currently 11 in the live rankings right now.
And
for
Erin's
doubles.
20th. Yeah, and Erin's number 20. So
and Layla's 17.
See, so there's the positive. I'm glad you left this for the end of our
absolutely.
Our chat with you.
That's perfect. That's what I want to hear, because it actually, Gabby, and depending on how Layla does in Guadalajara, Layla could actually be
like a big jump up.
Big jump up. If she wins, she gets 4,400, and Gabby gets 5,100 if she wins it. So they could potentially make. Let me see. Where's not the official doubles ranking. My God. Philip, get it together. They could jump into the top 10. Gabby's almost guaranteed if she wins another round in Guadalajara.
Be in the top 10. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's I think they're both it's great that Layla is driven to play doubles right now. And I know she wants to get there to the WTA finals. I know that's a goal she and Taylor Townsend set, which is cool. And it's really interesting that those two teams played a heck of a match actually at the US Open. That was quite a quarterfinal, and it was Layla and Taylor who had a big lead in the Super Breaker before Erin Routliffe and Gabby stormed back. And Erin and Gabby had to storm back in a hostile environment. Everybody in the crowd was pulling, understandably, for the American. And Layla, of course, I mean, Layla is a big hit with that American crowd as well, because everybody knows her. And, she had been to the final a couple of years ago where she gained, I think, thousands of fans there, if not more. So for Routliffe and Dabrowski to win the title the way they did and fight through that adversity, and as Mike kind of hit on in his interview with Erin, I mean, they'd only been together for 4 tournaments. So to be able to produce that level of tennis, I mean, Gabby to me has always been a fantastic doubles player. The way she commands the net, her understanding of
was
where her partner is on the court. It was
she
impressive.
was she was so good in that final too. Not to take away from Erin, but Gabby was right on top of things in that
Oh yeah.
final match, just closing points out all over the place. And what was nice to me when I spoke with Erin last week is I went back and listened to my previous interview with Erin from April 2022.
Mhm.
And in that interview, she said she wanted to be like Gabby one day. And I'm like, oh, isn't that sweet? And then they end
Mhm.
up teaming up as partners and winning their first women's double slam together. It was really nice, really endearing.
Well, what's crazy is that one, that this was Aaron's second title of the year in doubles, and this was Gabby's first
Yep.
and only title in doubles this past year as a double specialist. That's what's crazy to me, is that the only one she's won this year so far is
Is a slam.
a slam, which is, you have to admit, is very impressive.
Great time to peak. Perfect time to
Great
peak.
time to peak. And I think
Mhm.
the last thing we should wrap up with, and I have to thank you both again for taking time out of your day and your night to join us on the channel, is the Men's Davis Cup. Two of the hottest young, I don't even know if I should say that, but two of the most, Mike, don't make that face. Two of the up and coming players that I've known for a while now, but have made waves for Canada is Alexi Galarneau and Gabby Diallo. Those guys at the Davis Cup this year, phenomenal. Best
Yep.
wins they've had in their career. And they both, I believe they both go undefeated in singles?
I
Who had the
think
loss? Someone had a
I think
loss.
Diallo did lose to
Diallo
Jari,
lost.
maybe.
Yes, Diallo lost in straight sets to Jari, but I think Alexi
No
went.
shame in that.
No,
I think
absolutely not.
yeah, and I believe Galarno won all of his matches. Yep.
Yeah, and that's crazy. So if you were to sum up seeing that Davis Cup without Dennis playing, without Felix playing, how would you rate that, though, that this past tie?
I mean, it's
Yeah.
great for these kids. It's great for them to have this moment because I think it was so unexpected. When we saw the lineup, I think Ben and I were like, all right, how are we going to put a positive spin on this as they're coming in as defending champions,
Mm-hmm.
missing such key pieces? Although that being said, the way Felix and Dennis have been playing, do you think they could have done any better than what these guys just did? I don't think
Okay.
so. Not to mention Vasek Pospisil, who is like
Yes.
Captain Canada clutch, can do it in
Mm-hmm.
singles, can do it in doubles, and he's hardly played this year. I mean, he was off from February until about Wimbledon, came back in Wimbledon and admitted to me in Toronto like I wasn't even ready to go there, and is only now recently feeling healthy. So that's why I think expectations were so low, because even coming in, Vasek hadn't had a ton of match time at a full capacity. But we saw it in Toronto with these guys, and I think this is interesting, Philip, because you probably have seen them play way more than I have. I don't want to speak for you, Ben, but just because of all the college tennis they played and how plugged in you are to that universe. But what I saw from them in Toronto was so impressive, with Diallo getting his first ATP main draw win over
Mm-hmm.
Dan Evans,
Mm-hmm.
and Galarneau getting so close. I mean, he was up 3-love in that third set against
Mm-hmm.
who was it, Sarundalo, before things kind of came apart on him. Maybe the nerves, the pressure of the moment. But for them to go off to Davis Cup knowing that, oh geez, we're the defending champions, and here we are thrust into the 1 and 2 singles position, and come away with all those wins. I mean, what were they, 9-1 through those
Yep.
three ties against Chile, Italy, and
Or I
I'm
guess
drawing a
8-1.
blank.
8-1. Yeah.
Eight and
Yeah.
one.
Yep.
Kudos to them. Absolutely fantastic. Now we're in the final 8 once again, and we're facing Finland, which, no disrespect to them, I think that's as good as you can ask for in terms of who you're going to face to get things going at the finals later this year.
100%. Ben.
Yeah. Look, I think I said this on our podcast. I actually felt like Toronto was the key stepping stone for these two, and Alexi Galarneau and Gabriel Diallo, because as Mike mentioned, Diallo's massive win over Dan Evans, his first ATP main draw win, that must have done wonders for his confidence, told him he belongs. And Galarneau, who was very positive, honestly, in his press conference after his loss to Cerundolo. Felt like he was really trending in a great direction to be able to push a top 30 player, be up 3-love in the third with a point to go up 4-love and get a huge win there. So I think they actually arrived despite those results being losses. I think they got to Davis Cup feeling pretty loose and relaxed and liking the way they'd been playing and competing. And it was only a matter of time for it to come together, against the quality of players, like especially, I mean, the win over Italy really stands out.
3-0 Italy too. Like that's
And
so impressive.
yeah, and Italy is, loaded with the two Lorenzos, Musetti and
Yeah.
Sonego, who are two very talented players, especially Musetti being inside the top 20. And, I just took a look now. Actually, Galarneau and Vasek Pospisil are both playing at a challenger in Columbus. They both got wins as we speak now. So carrying over some of that momentum, they're both playing quality tennis. It's a great sign, I think, of depth in Canadian tennis when, as we mentioned, Felix not even being there, but Felix and Dennis not really on their A games, that Canada does have these options to turn to, and you can get a singles win from Diallo and Galarneau. And I think people around the sport are going to be very high on Diallo. His 6'7" frame, that bomb of a serve, big forehand, and he's very athletic for his size. That I think he has quite a high ceiling, probably more so than Galarneau, but Galarneau is a very nice baseline game as well.
I agree. And as you can probably tell, my camera overheated, so I had to switch over to my computer one. And then Mike wanted to get in the action by showing his one thing that he has hung up in his house, and it's
I love
the
it.
same racket.
Nice racket, though, isn't it?
It is a nice racket. Well done, Mike.
Beautiful.
Congrats.
Thank you, Mike. I was losing my connection. Now I'm losing my breath from sprinting up the flight of the stairs. But
I
we're almost at
appreciate
the end anyways. So
I appreciate the effort, Mike. I appreciate that. But Alexi went 5-0 for the week. Vasek went 4-0, and Gabby went 2-1. Like, I don't think you could ask that much more from both of them. And funny enough, I'm wearing an NC State shirt that Alexi went to, and so go Pack. 2, I tried returning Gabby's serve when I was in Kentucky when he was still there. That was terrifying.
I don't
it was fun to watch the coaches laugh at me while I tried to do it too. So that was fun.
Nice.
Thank you, Ben. So
and you're a real tennis player. I mean, you hit with the
am
place,
I?
And I've been a hitting partner. haven't you done that?
Thanks, Ben. Yes, I have done that. So it's still like I'm not even close to anywhere here. But I can't thank you guys enough for coming on and having Canada tennis be represented so well by you two. Can you give us an insight of who you're having next, or is that a secret?
No, we can share. We've got Alexandra Stevenson coming up to speak with us this weekend, so that'll be a good one. First time on Matchpoint Canada, so we're very excited about that one.
Very nice. And who else do you want to have on the podcast by the end of the year? Any shout outs you want to give before to plug in?
That's a good question. Jeannie Bouchard, if you're listening, we'd love to chat again. She actually just had a win this week. I know everybody thinks she's turning to pickle. I know everyone thinks she's turning to pickleball. Maybe we can remind her she can still absolutely play at this
swing
level.
A racket with strings in it.
Yeah.
Yes. But yes,
I want to have more guests who wear red and white like you're wearing, Phil, which I'm guessing is not by accident. This is by design, correct?
A little bit. I'm not gonna lie. I forgot that we were going to talk about Alexi. Sorry, man. But I was very happy that I wore this. So very glad you guys came on. Go follow and subscribe to Matchpoint Canada. All their links are down in the description below. Go follow them on Twitter. Loved having you guys on. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys are watching this and are not subscribed to the Tweener Tennis YouTube channel, make sure you like and subscribe. We're trying to hit 5K by the end of this year, and we're very close. So we'd love to have you guys join the Tweener Tennis channel, and make sure to go show Ben and Mike some love. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you guys soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Phil. Can't wait.
Thanks, Phil.